Welcoming everyone to the first session of the day. We are going to discuss about the prospective resources in this session. Now, the first topic on prospective resources and contingent resources will be presented by Sri Biswanath Ghosh. Biswanath is the head OALP in Cairn Oil and Gas Vedanta Limited. He leads the new business unit in the organization
Yeah.
to unlock value through exploration and early monetization of the new blocks under OALP. We welcome you, sir. I would also like to welcome Sudhir. Sudhir is currently working in the capacity of head exploration, OALP, and offshore. Sudhir, having successfully led massive projects in assets of Rajasthan, Nagayalanka, and basins like Krishna Godavari Ravva, Kambe, SA Block 1, Sri Lanka, and Palar, brings a very diverse portfolio to Cairn exploration leadership. We welcome you, sir. I would also like to welcome Ms. Barnali Barua Tokhi. She will be presenting on the estimation and classification of prospective and contingent BPRL resources following PRMS 2018 guidelines of a field in the Middle East. Barnali Barua Tokhi is a president at Bharat Petro Resources Limited, BPRL, has stakes in diverse plays across world basins, encompassing shallow and deep waters to Siberian on land, Indian conventional and unconventionals. BPRL operates blocks in Cambay Basin and Middle East. We welcome you, ma'am. I would also like to welcome Sri Arunbabu Nalamara. He will be presenting on the evaluation, classification, reporting, and auditing D11 prospect. Arun holds MTech degree from IIT Bombay. He has 14 years of subsurface experience across diverse range of projects in exploration, appraisal, and development. We welcome you, sir. I would also like to welcome Sri Pinakadhar Mohapatra, who is going to moderate the session today. He is the Director, Exploration and Subsurface at Antelopus Energy. After graduating from IIT ISM Dhanbad in Applied Geology, Pinak joined ONGC in the year 1983. May I now request you, sir, to commence the session and present the slides.
So thank you, Chandrima. So we start the session 1, which is on prospective resources. So before that, I think I must congratulate the leadership of DGH and compliment them for this huge opportunity given to all of us to discuss the very important topic on PRMS 2018. And before we start the session, I felt it is right to spend few minutes on setting the context as to why PRMS 18 is so important for all of us. I think I will spend few minutes, 2-3 minutes in setting the context, and then we'll start the presentations one by one. So Prasanjit, can you put the slides? So as has already been told, the PRMS system is basically, next slide please. So PRMS system gives us a consistent approach for estimating and evaluating the resource and reserve potential in the projects, and it also gives us a comprehensive classification framework. So why it is so important? Because it is very systematic. We start from prospective resources which are estimated in undrilled prospects, and then once we drill them and make a discovery, we estimate contingent resources, and when contingent resources are taken to commercialization, then we estimate reserves. So that way, there is a comprehensive classification framework in place in the PRMS scheme of things. And the most important thing is it gives the companies who are adopting that it's a avenue for effective portfolio management, because we are talking of the uncertainties on the estimation and also the project maturity profiles. And so how the project is maturing from prospective resources to contingent resources and reserves. So the company who are following, it automatically gives us this avenue for managing the portfolio. So also from the communication point of view, it provides us a effective opportunity to communicate with others on the estimation methodology. So as it was already told, internationally, so all the many companies, more than 150 companies, are following this framework, and all the institutes like SP, APG, ACG, then WPC, ESG, everyone has endorsed this. So that means if you want to communicate with the international community effectively, we have no other option than follow the PRMS. So next slide, please. So what are the real key issues or the main principles of PRMS? So PRMS focus on three key things. One, it is all about the producible or recoverable volume. So please note that it is all about recoverable volume, and also it is all based on the chance of commerciality. So commerciality is the paramount thing. And then it really vividly depicts the range of uncertainty. So as is already mentioned, depicted in the chart inside right middle, that it goes from prospective resources to contingent to reserves, which brings out the range of uncertainty, how it reduces. So key thing over the years, I have been involved with PRMS since its inception in 2007. What I have realized, integration is the key. So this PRMS mode of estimation, it will involve several disciplines starting from geology, geophysics, petrophysics, to reservoir engineering, facility engineering, and economics. All these experts, they have to come together and work as a team so that we can take benefit of the PRMS system. So not only one discipline will suffice. Everybody has to play a role depending on the stage where we are. So next slide, please. So we'll discuss briefly from prospective resources and end with reserves. So prospective resources are the quantum of petroleum as of a given date to be potentially recoverable. Again, we are talking of recoverable volume from an undiscovered accumulation. It is not discovered yet, but we are already envisaging the recoverable volume, what is expected from a prospect. So that is actually prospective resource. So it talks of petroleum system, which encompasses the charge, how it gives to the play system, which is group of prospects, and then the leads which are not matured, not enough analysis has gone, and finally we end of prospects after defining all the trapping elements, reservoir, and risking properly. Then we end up prospects. So that is, and then we estimate the prospective resource. Next slide, please. So when we drill the prospect, and if we make a discovery, then we estimate contingent resources in the discovery. So I think it's better to define the discovery at this stage so that all of us have to be in the same page. Discovery, we have to is one or several exploration wells have established through testing, sampling, or logging. Testing, sampling, or logging the existence of a significant quantity of potentially movable hydrocarbon. So again, we are talking of significant quantity of and movable hydrocarbon. So again, the recoverable thing comes into picture. So that this definition indicates that flowing the well by test is not mandatory for a discovery. It can be based on sampling or well logs, though with analogs. So if you have a log pay and we have an analog where similar log pay has given us commercial volume, then we can declare a discovery. Also, the discovery doesn't have to be economic. It need not be economic. So that means the contingent resources which are estimated in the discoveries, they are potentially recoverable from known accumulation by application of development projects not currently considered to be commercial. So that is not the essential part. The commerciality is not essential to call this something as contingent resources. So because it can be depending on certain contingencies. The commerciality can be depending on certain contingencies which has to be removed through time to make it economic. What can be those contingencies? They can be either the existence of a market for the oil and gas or the technology. Either there is no technology now or it is not under development. So then that's the contingency. So that means whenever there is availability of technology, these contingent resources will become commercial. Or we need some more acquisition of data to remove certain risks or uncertainties, and then it becomes commercial. So finally, for contingent resources, the one very important thing is all the discovered unrecoverable hydrocarbons don't have to be contingent resource. So that means if certain discoveries we have made, but we can't make them recoverable under the existing technology or technology which is being developed. So there is no technology at present, or there is no technology being developed through which we can make certain discovery as recoverable, then that cannot be considered as contingent resources. So for example, if you have a very ultra deep water discovery, maybe let's say beyond 3000 meters, and we know there is no technology for evacuation of such gas resource, then probably this cannot be called as contingent resources. So, but in future, with the advent of technology, it can be. So that is what the basic issues on the contingent resources. So next slide, please. When the contingent resource goes in the path of commerciality, then we call them as reserves. So that means a company has to commit to a development. That we have contingent resources and we commit to the development of these resources, then it's called as reserves. So reserves are anticipated to be commercially recoverable by application of development projects to the known accumulation. And then any reserves we estimate has to satisfy the internal decision criteria like rate of return, and then it can become reserves. So for anything to become reserves, it has to be discovered, it has to be recoverable, it has to be commercial, and it has to be remaining. So if you have produced all the volume, and then you don't call them as reserves. So it has to be some part of it has to be remaining. So there are some major conditions for booking of the reserves. The first thing that you have to have a development plan in place. You have to have financial commitment from the company to make the development happening. Then you have to have a market or a positive economics for the reserves to become commercial. Then the next point is you have to have a reasonable expectation of a market for the oil and gas, and also you have to have evidence of the necessary production and transportation facilities nearby. So these kind of things that you don't have to be really sign an agreement, marketing agreement, but you have to have reasonable expectation of market, or you have to have evidence of the facilities available nearby. Then we can book reserves. So with this, I think final issue, and then one more thing is for reserves to happen, there is one major thing which is a economic limit test. So next slide, please. So we can book only reserves up to the economic limit. Economic limit means it has to be positive undiscounted cumulative net cash flow. So please mark positive undiscounted. You don't discount the cash flow for the economic limit test. So this diagram, if you see, you have in the brown the cost, whether it is capex or opex, or in the green it is cash flow. So initially we spend money, so the cash flow is negative, but when you get the production and the revenue, then the green bars are showing the positive cash flow, and the cumulative cash flow is given in the red color, and the total production from the project is given in the black color above. So as you progress, then there is some point of time when the OPEX takes over the revenue. So that is where you have the negative cumulative the negative cash flow. So that means your cumulative cash flow reaches a peak. So that is the economic limit of the field. You don't book reserves beyond that. You may be still producing by making some loss, but that part of the field life you can't book as reserves. So reserve booking stops at the economic limit. So the PRMS 2018 also has provision to book some technically recoverable reserves, TRR, which can take into account anything beyond the economic limit. So that provision is there in the PRMS 2018. So finally, so there is a next slide, please. So finally, the PRMS 2018 gives us a very systematic way of putting our the uncertainties and the project maturity in a framework and define all our resources and reserves accordingly. So we start with the prospective resource, which is undiscovered. Then we book contingent resource after drilling a well and discovering it. And then when the contingent resource becomes commercial, we book reserves. And then the uncertainty is captured from low, mid, high, or P90, P50, and P10. So we have the names for that. Let's say for the prospective resource, we call as 1U for P90 volume, 2U for P50 volume, and 3U for P10 volume. And similarly for contingent resources, we have 1C, 2C, and 3C. And for reserves, we have proved, probable, possible. So just to clarify here, we have P1, P2, P3 for reserves for proved, probable, and possible. And P1 and P2 together is called 2P. P1, P2, and P3 together is called 3P. So this is in essence the whole scheme of things. And one major thing is the project maturity stages, which is given in the right side curve. So for prospective resource, it can be either a play, lead, or prospects, depending on the level of confidence and the analysis, the intensity of the analysis. And similarly for contingent resources, we have 4 categories depending on the level of maturity. And for reserves, there are 3 categories. Just to bring home a point that once you book the reserves in a particular category, it can remain there for 5 years. So that means within 5 years, we'll have to take it to either next category or downgrade it. Contingent resource also, we have to do that. But in PRMS, there is no time frame fixed. But they have mentioned that it cannot remain static in one category, it has to move. So this is in nutshell the whole introduction and the philosophy of PRMS 18. So we have many interesting presentations in store. So without spending much time, I will invite the next speaker, Biswanath Ghosh and Sudhir Mathur, whom I know personally. They are outstanding technical people and having a lot of experience in the PRMS system. So I think you have 20 minutes. I will request you to complete your presentation 20 minutes. If you require, I can just, before 5 minutes, I can give an alarm to saying by you have 5 minutes more. So we have 3 presentations in this system, in this session, and then we will take a question hour session at the end of all the 3 presentations. So over to you, Bisu and Sudhir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Just trying to upload the presentation. I hope you can see my screen. Let me know if you can see the screen.
Yeah, it's visible now.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I see 239 participants on this call. I hope everybody is staying safe in still this challenging time of COVID. Most of us are either working from home or shuttling between office. So just on the safety moment, stay safe, wear your mask when you are in a community, and maintain social distancing. That's how we will tide over it. Now, getting straight on to the topic, Sudhir and myself will take you through some of the key examples of prospective and contingent resources as per the PRMS guideline. While we as an industry has been following this methodology for quite some time, and the PRMS methodology is not very new to us, but then certain things which has come up in the 2018 guidelines are quite unique, as Mr. Mohapatra has already mentioned. In our talk today, we'll be just talking about how we estimate these resources, and also be taking you through some of the workflows we normally follow. Key thing we will talk about is how do we capture the uncertainties and the risk with the PRMS 2018 guidelines talks about. And we'll show you some examples and case studies for the same. And also as evaluators of resources and estimators of resources, what are the key challenges we face, both with the amount of data we have, or a case-to-case basis, or from basin to basin. They all have their unique challenges in estimation. And even from understanding the chances of success in terms of commerciality and what is recoverable versus technically recoverable. We'll also talk about that under the ambits of different regimes of fiscals as well, which applies to different countries and different basins. So as Mr. Mohapatra has already explained, the resource and the reserves classification is well guided by the PRMS guidelines. But just to reiterate the same, that the huge ranges of uncertainty, which is very high in terms of prospective resources, which are basically opportunities which we pick up to drill. And once we have drilled those opportunities and we have made a discovery, we move into a potentially commercial discoveries or discoveries which we want to commercialize. That's what we call as contingent resources. And then when we are certain about the commerciality and we want to produce from that commercial pool, we term this as reserves. The key boundaries being drilling those exploration wells from moving from prospective to contingent resources and appraising that in the contingent phase once the discoveries have been done, and maybe putting in a field development plan where the commerciality gets established with a full ambit of subsurface as well as surface, and the economic hurdles are reached. As we move from the left to the right, the key thing which changes is the data quality, the uniqueness of the model, and as you narrow down your models with increased chances of commerciality. Today, we'll focus on the first two parts of it, the prospective resources and the contingent resources in our talk. And we'll talk about how we capture these ranges of volumetric estimation uncertainties, especially as per the PRMS 2018 guideline, wherein a high case and a low case ranges in a probabilistic methods of P90 to P10, and the mid case of a P50. So we'll see some examples and how we move from plays to prospects and then moving that from prospects into discovered pools. So in Cairn Oil and Gas, and as well as like any other company, we all dwell with data sets which are 3D in nature. Either we have acquired high density seismics or we have captured a lot of data these days through which we can build 3D model. That helps us to run 3D simulations as well as have a full rock volume understanding of the subsurface these days. While we often also, where there are some limitation of data, we often generate such maps and even try to model it on a 3D sense. Hence, more and more estimations are moving into probabilistic methods of estimating resources these days. And we would like to capture our uncertainty ranges within ranges of distribution functions or statistical distribution functions. So this is what it illustrates, that how the different parameters of resource estimations from a rock volume to net to gross and porosities and saturations and fluid factors all can be in a highly computing world like today. We can generate probability distribution functions, which can be multiplied together in a Monte Carlo sense to give us an estimation of petroleum in place or petroleum resources in place, whether in terms of standard stock tank of oil in place or in terms of gas in place. So this is critical, and PRMS guidelines talks about multiple methods, and probabilistic method is one of them. And as we mature the data sets and move from prospective to contingent resources, we can use geostatistical methods as well, or if we use simpler maps or even have 2D data sets, we can use the deterministic methods as well, based on the maturity of the data and the maturity of the models. But more and more, I think people, with the computing becoming easy, we run such probabilistic simulations or Monte Carlo simulations. So we at Cairn, we also follow this. So what we end up is with a log normal solution, and PRMS clearly now defines how to pick your mid case, high case, and low case from such probability distribution functions in terms of P90, P10, and P-mid, which is P-mean. While the probability distribution function is often best represented statistically by a P-mean in a log normal solution, but PRMS clearly defines, as Mr. Mohapatra says, that a mid case would be a P50 case or a median case as per the guidelines. So we all follow that, and we capture these as we do our resources. PRMS guidelines in terms of prospective resources, when they define prospective resources, they also say the resources estimation has its own uncertainty. Every parameter has its own uncertainty, and the uncertainty has to be captured appropriately. And the risks and uncertainties, PRMS guideline, 2018 guideline clearly says, are not synonymous. So risks are nothing but chances of getting such discrete events, like whether you have a success of a discovery or it's not a success or it's not a discovery. So that's how we quantify a risk. Whereas once you have a success or a discovery, there can be several outcomes or ranges of possible outcomes. We can have a small resource pool or a high resource pool. And it is very difficult to ascertain that unless you have drilled a well or several such wells before you really narrow down those uncertainties. Hence, as per the PRMS guideline, we also follow the same methodology. The risk domain is actually what is not in a discovery. And once a discovery is done, whether through a testing or through logging or through some analog and the data using the well data sets, we estimate a ranges of outcomes which we define within the uncertainty. The resources and the ranges of uncertainty is captured in a success domain. So wanted to make that clear. And obviously, when we do this, we often get into a systematic bias, and we'll talk about these challenges as we show some examples. And to get away with a bias, in Cairn Oil and Gas, we use a 5-point risking method, and then we subdivide those risking elements, especially with the geological chance of success. So PRMS guidelines also talks about a prospective resources being attached with the geological chance of success and the probability of development, probability or the chance of success that this can be developed. And it is also the probability of developing this also depends on whether it is commercial or whether it is economical. So it is clearly laid out and very well explained in the 2018 guidelines, and hats off to DGH that we are now incorporating all these thought processes in these classifications. Now, coming back to my point about risking, there will be systematic bias how we define these risks when we associate that with the prospective resources. And with these 5-point risking model, what we do internally is put it in a chance adequacy matrix. And a chance adequacy matrix is governed by the confidence level, the quantity, and the quality of the data sets we use to ascertain this ranges of outcomes and whether we can be in these ranges of outcomes. So just wanted to leave that thought with you. The risks and uncertainties are very different, and PRMS guidelines talks about it, and we should be following it. Going quickly into some examples. So I'll be taking up a few examples, and then I'll let Sudhir talk about some examples as well, both in the conventional and the unconventional resource estimate. This is an example from East Coast of India in KG Basin, wherein a prospect was matured after mapping very good quality 3D data sets. And we moved this from play to prospects as we matured the data sets from 2D to 3D data sets, and even progressing the reprocessing as well into a broadband seismic. And this is quite well published, and some of you might be familiar. And the prospect here in contention is a 3-way deep closure against a pinch out within a lower braided sequence. So this is a top of a synthetic map. And when we do this estimation of resources, we use a GRV method wherein we take all these ranges of outcomes, which comes out from a map based and a 3D estimation from these subsurface mapping, and we put it into different distribution functions, and each of these are well explained, and it is being cross-checked at multiple levels with different technical parameters, which I'll be showcasing to you. So capturing all these separate sub-steps and separate parameters and all the ranges which comes out into a Monte Carlo simulation is critical for assessing the resources. And as you can see, these have been captured. And then we attribute this entire range of these parameters to yield a resource value, and which is attributed with a P sub G, or a geological chance of success. And then we also try to find out what is a critical trap element. How did we do this? Internally, we follow a very rigorous workflow. And in each of these workflow and sub-steps, we try to brainstorm and even do a cross-check of all our ranges that we capture. And it is backed with data and analysis and analytics. And PRMS 2018 guidelines talk about it, that the estimation of these uncertainty ranges should be well captured in terms of the technical merit. For example, when we are doing a GRV estimation, as you can see in the left-hand top corner, we also check for the column heights and the seal capacity. Are we breaching that? So it has to be, all these uncertainty ranges of high, lows has to be cross-checked within its limits, and it has to be backed with data. So this is what we do, and this is an example for the same thing which I was showing you earlier, how those ranges have arrived. For example, when you look into a reservoir properties of net to gross to porosities, we use our GDE models. And also we use some of the porosity depth trends. Different analog data sets come into play, especially in prospective resources where you do not have enough data nearby within your place segment. Possibly you can fetch analogous data from other play segments nearby, or analogous data from global analogs, which are similar to that type of a setting. So we use porosity depth strands, effective stress strands to see what could be the possible ranges of porosities and net to grosses and even permeabilities from Buckle's plot based on some of the offset well database or typical analogs which fit into it. Even in cases of what sort of fluid type we would have, are we creating a prospective resources for an oil play or a gas play, or it's a mix of both? So we also do that through petroleum system modelings and also capturing the different elements of that. And obviously the reservoir engineer comes in to tell us what sort of expansion factor or shrinkage factors we can have and what sort of scenarios model we can build and the recoveries thereof which can be evolved out of it. So capturing the ranges of uncertainty is very, very critical. This is a showcase of what goes behind putting in those probability distribution functions of every parameters. And this is exactly what PRMS 2018 defines, capturing those uncertainties with technical data and analogs. So this is another example from Rajasthan, where in a northern fault block in a Rageshwari area of a gas pool, which also has an oil below it, was also tested. It was prospective because the northern part of the fault block was not tested before, and neither could it be booked into contingent resources. But when we drill a well, we get to see the similar that there is hydrocarbon. And obviously there are a lot of uncertainties with where the contact is if you don't get the hydrocarbon water contact. So this is just a snapshot of showing how we again capture different resource ranges and the resource parameter ranges, both pre-drill and post-drill. And sometimes we move from probabilistic estimation to deterministic estimation based on what data point we have. If we have a 3D data, but there is only one data point of a well, or maybe a couple of data points in a well, often it becomes very tricky to capture it in a probabilistic sense, and we can move into a deterministic sense. And PRMS guidelines talks about these methods as well as acceptable, both in terms of prospective resources and contingent resources. I will now hand it over to Sudhir, who's going to talk about a typical example where uncertainty is huge, and you'll see that even the uncertainty remains as we move from prospective resources to contingent resources in a field called Nagalanka, and he will show you some pre-drill and post-drill examples. Sudhir, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Vishu, and good morning, everyone. I think this is the field which Mr. Mohapatra was the heading actually this group towards Vedanta, and we discovered this really a difficult pool. So this is another case study, Nagalanka, following the PRMS guideline, as Vishu has just now in detail he explained. So we have matured the deep Sindrift prospect in Nagalanka. As you can see, the first seismic sections toward the left side. So that's the legacy data. When we got this block, we found this particular data. From there, we have acquired the 2D data, the second snapshot in seismic, where we can start seeing actually the Sindrift geometries. And from there to the 3D data, which has been acquired, and we clearly find out these the Sindrift prospects, which is like a buried hill at the Nagalanka level. So as Mr. Mohapatra said in his initial talk, that the data analysis and integration is the key. And that's the main thing what we define in PRMS guideline as well, in all different global guidelines as well. So that's what exactly we did, and we found the Nagalanka success after integrating and analysis all the data in and around, and this Sindrift, which is a very, very deep, tight reservoir. So after discovery, we found that these are the millidarcies or nanodarcies permeability is rock, and that's probably the typical example of unconventional as per unconventional reservoir as per the new guideline of PRMS 2018. So it actually classified into that actually. Compared to what we initially thought when we started appraising this field after the discovery, and when we were struggling with the timeline as well, Mr. Mohapatra knows very well. However, the discovery bearing very, very light oil, which is a 51-degree API oil, which is compensating the reservoir quality, which is in nanodarcies. Yes, sir. I'll go fast. So hydrofact is essential to flow Golapalli reservoir. Post-drill volumes estimated, as you can see towards the left-hand side of the slide. So we have what we had the pre-drill to post-drill. There are huge amount of changes into the uncertainty ranges, what we captured, but we are still within the range. And that exactly is the beauty of this particular thing. When we are capturing the pre-drill ranges from P90 to P10, in fact, we go up to P99 to P1. And that captures, and we found and fall within that. and then we are redefining post our discovery. This is another slide where the permeability, which we are talking just now, is a key and the highest impact on this particular type of the discoveries. So the recovery profile, hence we evaluated and run the multiple cases here for the as per the PRMS guideline. We plotted here are all core and the test data to determine the ranges of the permeability and considered different EUR basis the permeability ranges, as you can see in the table. So the uncertainty still remains. Even if we do all of these sort of things, and the lateral extent of the base zone, it's like saturation height functions on the long laterals with the multiple stage frag, all of that are still remain sort of uncertainty in spite of being lots of core studies, extended well test, and multiple frag fluid analysis with the core compatibility. So going to the next slide here. Okay, coming to the real unconventional, we are talking here now as per the PRMS guidelines. So again, using the play-based approach, what we are seeing here is a little different for the unconventional. So what we are looking here is the thickness, TOC map, and the VRO, which is a vitrinite reflectance. That's the main thing to do the play-based analysis here. We came out with the different play segments divided into further sub-play segment polygons, and materiality map based on the black and volatile oil, or it is a dry wet gas or the retrograde gas. So basis that, we have ranked them, and we came out with some sort of a technically recoverable hydrocarbon. So that's what we did in the entire Rift Barmel Basin, as you can see with the different sub-polygons. Still, the E cost is the critical for the production of the unconventional, or we call it as a resource play. Hence, we subdivided the play segment into the 1 by 1 square kilometer grid calculated predicted EUR for each of individual unit against E cost. For each of the sub-segment polygon sections, we created a distributed or the distribution what we are showing in the top. And then based on the single well economy, we determine what is the minimum material field size that will economic. And so in this manner, the probability distribution for each of the sub-play segment as shown in the previous slide, that has been carried out. And combining all the distribution, we came up with a combined E-cost estimate for this sort of unconventional production, and where we are defining it as a P90 as a 1U, P50 as a 2U, and P10 as a 3U, as per the PRMS guidelines. I think this is the critical thing, and this is how we generally do as a Bible for the PRMS guideline. Going to the next slide, Ghosh.
Yeah, so I'll take this one. So what's happening now is obviously a lot of companies, when we look now, and there's an early monetization policy which has also come in, that we want to fast track from resource to reserves. And early monetization policy allows that. So what happens is that every little small pool we discover, whether from a discovered well or from another additional appraisal well, we want to put it onto production. And our RSCs and the PSCs allow that, putting in a mini FTP or a TAR and proceeding to recovering those resources into reserves and producing them as EURs. So there is a dynamic assessment of resource to reserve which will emanate out of this. So I just wanted to pose this as a key challenge while we follow the PRMS guideline, but maintaining that dynamic modeling from resources to reserves, especially in an early monetization setup, is very, very critical. How we capture the resource and the reserves together, and how we move along that project line or a project life cycle, as it mentions in the PRMS. So this is one of the key challenges. And I would like to end with some of the other key challenges as estimators or resource evaluators when it comes up to estimating resources. And you hear some of the auditors talk about it this afternoon. It all depends on the data maturity, the technology, and the interpretation. And it's still interpretive in prospective resources estimation and contingent resource estimation. So it brings in a systematic bias. So how do we remove that systematic bias is very, very important. Assessment of recovery efficiency at a prospecting stage, but PRMS has addressed that by use of analogs, which is very, very helpful. Estimation of resource size often dwindles and is debated very often, whether it is discovered or undiscovered. Where is the boundary? Conventional versus unconventional, as just Sudhir talked about from Nagaland and what we're doing in Rajasthan. And Pinakji was also talking about that, what is technically recoverable versus what is economically recoverable. How do you ascertain that? And maybe it's technically recoverable today, but I can do some tweaks into my fiscal to make it happen economically, which
So you have to conclude, please.
Yes, sir. I'll conclude. This is my last slide. Economic commercial status is very, very critical because technology and market play a game here. And large number of contingent resources are stranded globally. And dynamic resource and reserves estimation for early monetization setup is something which we need to monitor in the Indian space, especially the PSC and RSA. That's all we had to say about prospective resources, capturing the uncertainties and the risks and the methodologies, both in conventional and unconventional play. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed our talk, and we'll take question and answer.
Thank you, Mr. Biswanath and Sudhir. Really, very interesting thoughts, particularly on risking methodology and also the unique workflow to capture the range of uncertainties in the parameters, and also the unconventional, how do you estimate the unconventional prospective resources, and finally the dynamic assessment for converting from contingent resource to reserves. Very interesting thoughts. I think this will encourage a lot of discussions and people will try to emulate. Thank you very much. Any questions, maybe we'll put in the last. So next session, maybe can I request Ms. Barnali Barua Tokhi to make a presentation on estimation and classification of BR and CR of a field in Middle East. Barnali, stage is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Can DGH please share the presentation that I have already shared? Can you put it up, please? Thank you very much. So I'm starting now. My topic today is estimation and classification of prospective and contingent resources following the PRMS guidelines. And I will be showing the example from a field in the Middle East that we operate and how we have gone about the estimation of that. So can you please take us to the next slide? Yes. So I know that the eminent speakers before me have brought out the changes that has come about from 2007 to 2018, but still I would like to touch upon them, especially because we see a number of changes that were very much wanting. This is something that is going to add value to the new guidelines, and especially in the chance of commerciality, which Biswanath Ghosh has already mentioned, but I'll be bringing out in a little more details. And then in evaluation method, we knew that earlier deterministic and probabilistic were the recognized methods. Geostatistical means was just a tool, but here now it has been recognized as a separate method. And in one of our fields where we have stakes in, the operator has done a big uncertainty analysis based on the geostatistical method. So I'll be sharing a few slides from there. And then the economic status will be covered. And one of the important things that DGH also mentioned is that so far we have been concentrating on the technical aspects. And we know for a field to be developed, to be brought into the reserves and production mode, we need the financing. So the final investment decision is a very important aspect that has been brought into this 2018 guidelines formally. So this is a very important step that has been considered here. And then I'll take you through the case study, and So this is just a slide for the definitions. We are all aware there are no changes in the definitions of contingent and prospective resources in 2018 guidelines. So in want of time, I will not go through this. So can you, yeah. So the big changes that we have seen here is that the first part is the red polygon, the production. Production earlier was envisaged only from the volumes which are upgraded to the reserves category. But now we know that it is not so. We can have, geopolitical want of production from even contingent resources if they are already discovered, or it may be due to certain technology testing. So production is not boxed along with reserves, but it is now independent of that. and we are at freedom to take production even from contingent resources. And then this blue box that I've highlighted is the unrecoverable. Earlier, the unrecoverable was only the commercial sense. But we know that the unrecoverable may be due to technology, may be due to the reservoir conditions, high temperature, high pressure, very ultra deep waters. So maybe new technology is wanted there. So these are some of the changes that has been done, which is very much beneficial to the people who practice the system and who are looking forward to upgrading their reserves and to bring out those volumes of hydrocarbons which were not considered to be producible, but due to the production being removed from the reserves part, maybe even contingent resources can be taken production from. And the chance of commerciality now has been just kept right up to the reserves, and we know beyond that, obviously it is commercial. So there was, this is another improvement that we see. So the next slide, please. Yeah. Within contingent resources in the subclasses, earlier there was a little ambiguity between the development unclarified and the development on hold categories, but now they have been very clearly defined that development on hold is a notch more certain than development unclarified. So these are better definitions coming up in the 2018 version, which makes it easier for us to classify our reserves and contingent resources. Next one, please. Yeah. Mohapatra ji has mentioned about the P1, P2, P3 category, which are the discrete ones, and the inclusive ones, which is 1P, 2P, and 3P. So this discrete and including factors are better defined now. Earlier, many times I have seen people loosely using them interchangeably. So that was, I mean, it was not very much clear earlier, but now, of course, for reserves, it was already known. For contingent, also it was mentioned. But for the first time in the prospective category, the undiscovered resources are mentioned very clearly as U1, U2, U3, and the discrete ones, and 1U, 2U, 3U are the inclusive ones. We all know what it is, so let me not go into it in more details. So this is the change in the nomenclature matrix. So the next one, please. Next slide. Yeah. Now for the commercial, I think geologic discovery is already made in contingent resource. Commerciality is dependent of commerciality for contingent resources, whereas in prospective resources, the chance of commerciality depends on both the chance of geologic discovery as well as chance of development. So we are yet to drill the wells, we are yet to discover the pools and the fields. So commercial chance of success in prospective resources is much more uncertain compared to the contingent categories. Next one, please. Yeah, another important factor that has come about in the PRMS is the evaluation method. As I have already mentioned in my introductory slides, earlier the deterministic method was recognized, of course. That is the one that people mostly made the models and the map-based estimations. So here, obviously, the discrete values for the input parameters were taken, and we used to make the models, the static models, based on those input parameters, those discrete values, and we used to get the low, best, and high cases of deterministic estimations. And then we also had the probabilistic estimation, where a full range of possible values in terms of assumptions and forecasts were taken, and a Monte Carlo simulation was run. We used to get by using the probability method, we used to get our P90, P50, P10 numbers, and using the statistical method, we used to get our P mean. So those were very much used in the industry. We have well-recognized softwares to go through that. But now for the first time, PRMS 2018 has recognized the geostatistical method. Geostatistical method is actually a mathematical technique or process which deals with the various analysis or studies or interpretation that is done on the geological and engineering data, and which brings out the variations or the uncertainty within the reservoir model. So geostatistical it is a mix of both, because we take into consideration all possible discrete models that can come out from the various amount of data that we have in a field. So this is an included method recognized in PRMS 18. And we have already seen one of our operators use it. So if you take me to the next slide, I can explain it a little better. Yeah, so here in, I can share the field, it's Mozambique, where we have done a big amount of, there is a huge amount of data available in this field, and the operator has done the uncertainty analysis based on geostatistical method. Just to give you a glimpse for the velocity model, if you just look at the bottom slides to the right, the two slides, we see that the seismic mapping has been done and a reservoir model has been made. They are constrained in this case by 2 wells. So where the wells are there, and based on the one velocity model, the deterministic method has been applied and the model is ready. But we know that there is a lot of uncertainty where the wells are not there. So there are a number of models, reservoir models that can come out. So the last one you can see in geostatistical, there is a number of models that can come out just considering only the velocity, that data information that we have. Now we know apart from velocity, we have a number of geobodies that we can map. We have the logs from where we can get the porosity, saturation, the cores to give us permeability, the oil-water contact. So a number of uncertain parameters are with us, and it is the best way. If you can just take me to the next slide, I'll give it a little more details. So here you can see the input can be 2 different variations of your seismic, and then you can have time to depths or the well integration, the geologic tops in the seismic to well tie can be brought out. Geobody mapping can be done. The contacts can be worked on. Through the wireline logs, we can have the different petrophysical model considering porosity, permeability. The formation volume factors can be also modeled. So based on those, the structural models can be brought out. And then the rock models, the integration of all this will give us the final, a number of reservoir models which may be possible, and from this analysis you can pick the one that you feel best defines your reservoir. So this is now recognized and should be used in the industry, because we have a lot of information, and geostatistical method integrates everything that we have to bring out a robust model. So this is one of the factors that we feel happy that in 2018 it has come out. So if you can take me to the next slide. Yeah, another factor that we see an improvement is in the contingent resources. Earlier, the term marginal was used. Marginal.
Barnali, sorry to interrupt, 3 minutes more.
All right, so let's go back. Let's go ahead, and I'll just talk about my, yeah, just take me to my example. That will be more interesting. Yes. Yeah, so this is one of the fields that we have in the Middle East. The middle green one, we have drilled 3 exploration wells. So we know that this is the production, I mean the hydrocarbons have flown to the surface. So it is kept in the development pending category. The next slide, please, the next one. Yeah, here we have the 3D data, and through analogy, we know that there is a better chance of success here. So we have categorized in the prospective resources under prospect category. The next slide, please. The next one, we do not have 3D information. We only have 2D, so we have kept it in the lead. So if you can take me to the next slide, I'll give you more details on the contingent resources. Yeah, so this is a carbonate field. Here we have mapped a number of clinoforms in the carbonates that are deposited. And you can see that this was also covered in a paper by Stromanger, where the various sequences, those are the cliniforms, have been mapped. And here, what we see is that the exploration wells that were drilled covered only 3 of such sequences. So these 3, for each of these clinoforms, we made a separate static model. And the ones where wells were drilled, we have upgraded them to contingent. And where wells were not drilled, we still kept it in prospective. In the appraisal, we just recently drilled our appraisal wells, which were successful. So now we have upgraded those clinoforms also to the contingent category. So now our entire field is in contingent. Why we did that? Because these are carbonates. We know that the contact is one in the reservoir. We know as reservoirs it's connected today. But then to go into the reserves, which is the next step, we will need the deliverability, the secondary porosity development in these carbonate clinoforms. So it was imperative that we drill the wells, know our reservoirs, to be then consider it there to be taken to the reserves category. And then we have also utilized here the early production system, because the wells are drilled. This is on land. We can re-enter the wells and take production as an early production system. So not going into full field development or even with the full feed study complete, now that the production can be taken from contingent, we are putting it into practice. We have already talked to the regulatory authorities. They are forthcoming. So from this contingent, we can start production, and parallelly, we will also have our feed study going on. And then we will take it to reserves and put the field on production in a proper way within a year. But currently, we want to take production from the wells already drilled because of the 2018 guidelines allows us to do that. So that has been a good benefit for us. The moment it is out, we looked at it, how best to use it. So can you take me to the next slide? For the same, we have also carried out the probabilistic estimate. And we know in the industry that the moment your probabilistic P50 number is equal or very similar to your deterministic number, your chance of uncertainty reduces. This is what happened here. And so we are more certain about the results, and we are certainly ready to take it to the next step. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Barnali. Nice presentation. I was feeling so bad to interrupt you, but you completed perfectly on dot. And also very, very interesting example on the geostatistical model. How does it really capture the uncertainty range? A very nice example. And also from your example on carbonate, you have also already answered Bisu and Sudhir's dilemma, the early monetization, and how to convert the contingent to reserves. Very, very nice examples, and really congratulate for you on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
So next session is by Arunbabu Nalamara. So he will describe the estimation methodology of a prospect in a D11 block, and how does he adheres to the PRMS 2018 by describing the workflow. So over to Arun, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for giving me this opportunity, especially.
Yes.
Okay, now it is in slideshow mode. So today I am here to present what we have done the work in D11 cluster for Antelopus energy. Here we have basically this work can be This D11 cluster we have received in DSF2 round 2018, and this is located in Bengal Mahanadi Basin with water depth approximately 80 meters. So here we have received very huge data, huge area around 5,500 square kilometer, more than 500 square kilometers. And we have 6 wells drilled and got 6 gas discoveries with a good amount of gas rate. So the company like Antelopus Energy, it is very essential to add prospective resources in order to become to play important role in India and elsewhere. So D11 has given such opportunity with its huge good quality data, as well as the data also very helpful in giving DHI kind of indicators. So helpful to direct hydrocarbon indicators in this area. So I'm showing how we have progressed with the particular strategy and how we have come up with prospective resources in this field. So data part, we have fully covered 3D seismic data with 6 wells with a lot of logs, as well as sonic T-wave and S-wave data. And we have also got check shot data for 5 wells. We have followed a strict workflow, standard workflow for this prospects analysis. So we have regional stratigraphy, very good understanding of it, and we understood the play fairways. And we have all kinds of data which are useful in play fairway analysis. So on the seismic interpretation part, as we have very huge data and it is full of amplitude booms, if we don't follow a particular strategy, we can be missed somewhere, and we may end up without having any fruitful results and spending a lot of time. And that too, a team of 5 members, it will be there are a lot of hundreds of leads without good work, there can be no ending of it. So we have followed a particular strategy, and we have got the all reservoir properties, and with the right areas we have estimated volume. This is the regional stratigraphy. Geological stratigraphy, we have picked up 4 sequences mainly: middle Miocene and late Miocene, upper late Miocene, and Pliocene sequences. Not only that geological, but we have transformed this understanding coming up HST, LST, or sand events, which are otherwise we could have picked continuously, even though they are discontinuous. So this gave a framework for further proceedings. And the play fairways are simple here. We have shelfal sands cut through by erosional unconformities, and some place faults are acting as field entrapments. So here I'm just giving the pace and distribution across all the fields. So we have around 14 gas-bearing sands discovered, and our prospects are in a play type of low relief anticlines, which are eroded by unconformities, and we have complex channel fields, propagational wedge slope fans, as well as levee channels and basin floor fans. So all these kind of reservoir sands do give direct hydrocarbon indications, except the deeper ones. Why is that? I will show in the next slide. So here we are getting the amplitudes blooms, like here whatever I'm showing one of the sands. PSAN 380, which is giving very clear indication, and it is the top and bottom of it are mappable, and with this kind of data we have forwarded. Yeah. So here I'm showing the cross plot between VP by VS and IP. Here these sands are color coded with the depth. So shallow sands are soft sands, and which are giving differentiation between different fluids, and deeper sands are compact sands which are not giving any differentiation. So here I'm showing different prospects which we have mapped in D11 cluster. So here there is huge data, and we have a lot of leads on different sequences, and we have categorized them, and we have made them small in count by having particular strategy, which is high amplitude and polarity, negative top and positive down, and also the conformity with the structure. So by selecting, maturing few leads into prospects, we have done multiple attribute analysis as well as the depth mapping, and among that the bright amplitude zone with the depth contours conformance is the key aspect in these all prospects. So here I'm showing one of the prospects, which is PSAN 380, and I'm showing RAI section, which is depth converted. So here you can see wherever this sand is present, their bright amplitude, and evidently the D10 well, which is further below of these bright amplitudes, doesn't show any saturations, and the well, which is D11, which is showing a good saturation and with a good amount of cross sand. And so this is just to show two-way time and how we have depth converted. And the third picture is showing depth conformance of amplitude. So we have done multiple attributes here. Those are RMS amplitude, and some of negative and some of positive, and spectral decomposition at various frequencies. Also instantaneous frequency and sweetness. Each and every attribute a tuning effect from the prospect. As you see here, before the detuning, amplitudes are not prominent across the area. Once you detune, the amplitudes are spreading across, and making this is whole area is fluid containment. So we have collected all the information from geophysical to geological, petrophysical, and reservoir engineering analysis, and by getting all this data and with the distribution charts, we have estimated the probabilistic resources. So here I'm showing how we have determined the P10 and P90 for various parameters. For GRV, around the high amplitude zone, we have taken low area, and the last closing contour or gas shell contact as the high area. Likewise, for NTG, phi, and saturation, we have taken 2 wells or more wells data, and we have taken minimum and maximum for low and high wells. So for the PG, we have taken all the available data in D11 cluster and come up with a single value. So with these values, we have estimated probabilistic values and recoverable values. So as you see, for risking of this prospect, we have no problem with source components and timing and migration. But in reservoir component, we have put for performance 80% confidence, as well as in closure and containment components for the data quality, where we have low confidence in the velocity data, we have kept 70% confidence, and the seal effectiveness we have kept 90%. With all we have arrived at 50% 50% of chance of success. So it is quite good for a prospect, and we have for all the prospect we have been done in the similar way. So as per the guidelines, the prospect is an undrilled potential accumulation, which is having all the ingredients to be a drillable target. That is the as per definition as per the PRMS 18 guidelines. So in the chart, left chart, you can see we are at the prospective resources, and for the maturity subclass, we have matured that in from lead to prospective. Yeah, this is all from my side. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Arun, for describing such a nice prospect with a very, very robust workflow, and also very, very nicely describing how it is related to the PRMS 2008 18 guidelines, both for the volumetrics, risking, and also the classification of the prospective resources as per the PRMS 18. Very, very nice presentation indeed. So now we'll go to the question and answer session, because we have completed all the sessions. So there is 2-3 questions. One is on the what is the difference between P50 and P mean. I think I will take up that question. So see, normally whenever we do the estimates, we estimate the full range from P1 to P99. So and P50 comes in between. So that's almost the median value. That means if in case of a P50 outcome, so there is a probability that that chance of occurring that event is 50% or more. So, but whereas P mean is the average of the mean of the entire distribution. So from P1 to P99, the average of the entire distribution, what you call as the P mean. So in reality, P mean is less than P50, maybe P35, P50, depending on the skewness of the distribution, what you follow. In case of a normal distribution, P50 may be equal to P mean, but in case of a log normal, it may be P30, P35, P50, depending on the range you are given. So hopefully that's satisfied. There is another question, whether on what basis whether we take whether it is a probability distribution or deterministic evaluation. So maybe Bisu, you can take that question, or Barnali, whoever wants. How do you decide when to take deterministic or probabilistic?
Yeah, this is Barnali. I would like to say that for any estimation, you should try both. If you have a good amount of data with you, a number of wells drilled where you have better control within the field, deterministic will give you a good estimation. But in case you don't have too much data set within your reservoir, you can have analogs nearby and you can do a probabilistic. However, for both, you should run deterministic as well as probabilistic. And as I said in my presentation, if your deterministic matches with your P50 or P mean, you have a better confidence. So depends on the amount of data you have. Thank you. I hope that answers.
Yes, perfectly. So thank you all. I think we have come to the end of the session 1. So almost we have been able to honor the time. So maybe Sanjit and team, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, everyone. So we'll just end this session and begin the next session in a couple of minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.